Welcome to MTX Chess. I'm so excited to show you this video today about Alireza Firouzja's favorite opening, the Caro Kann. It is a great response to e4 if you're playing with the black pieces. But before we begin, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. We have new videos coming every week on this channel and you won't want to miss them. So before we get into the Caro Kann, it's really important to understand why the Caro Kann was necessary in terms of how openings are developed. So we all understand the French opening. After white plays e4, we get e6, and after d4, something like d5. And this was really a popular opening, and it still is. But the problem, though, for black in this opening is that the light square bishop is absolutely horrible because of this pawn. The Caro Kann was developed really to solve the problem of the bad light square bishop for black. So understanding that, you can really get a grasp of some of black's major moves in the opening. So this is the basic Caro Kann setup. It's a great response for black to e4. Something I think if you're playing at the intermediate level will kind of throw off your opponent a little bit. So if you know the main lines, you're already going to be a little bit better. There's a couple of variations I want to go through today. I want to go through the advanced variation, the classical variation. I want to go through the very popular Panov Botvanic attack. And I also want to touch on the exchange variation. So the advanced variation. White has a number of responses in this scenario. They can play e5, which will initiate the advanced variation. They can play knight to d2, which would initiate the classical variation. They can capture and then play c4. There's a number of things they can do, but we'll start with the advanced variation, which is when white plays e5. The great thing about the pawn coming to e5 is now this square becomes an outpost for the black bishop. So bishop f5. Already early in the game, black has established their light square bishop on a nice square, something they never would have been able to do had black chosen to play the French. Here, the advanced variation usually continues with moves like knight c3 and then e6. See this really nice pawn chain for black, building kind of this fortress here in the center. A big theme in the Caro Kann for white is to go after this black bishop. This bishop is outside the pawn chain and really has limited squares to move to. And so a classic move in the advanced variation is a move like g4. And after the bishop comes back to g6, white's going to continue with their development with a move like knight g to e2. And a very common theme you'll see all throughout chess, but especially here on the Caro Kann, is attacking the base of your opponent's pawn chain. This is white's pawn chain right here. So what does black want to do? Black wants to attack the base of this pawn chain. The base of a pawn chain is always the weakest pawn, and black does just that by playing c5. That's okay though. White is going to go after the bishop, and white plays h4, obviously threatening a move like h5, and the bishop's trapped, and so black plays h5 themselves. This is always a great idea. Anytime you've got two pawns kind of bearing down on your bishop like this, playing h5 is kind of a solution, because if they capture, then the bishop gets the nice square, and if they push, then they've created a permanent weakness on this g4 square. So in this position right here, a very common move, I'll take the arrows off. In this position right here, a very common move for white is knight f4. A nice little fork here on the bishop. And you'd be surprised, the best move in this position for black is actually bishop h7. So this gives up the pawn, so after knight takes h5, it may look like black's down a pawn, and they are. But the reality is this is the computer says that this is an equal position, very dynamic play on both sides. And it's nice having the extra pawn as black, but white is going to has lots of counterplay with some quick development coming on the queen side and with good squares for all their pieces. So that is the advanced variation. The classical variation of the Caro Kann is a little bit different. It starts the same way, obviously. So here we got our classic Caro Kann setup. But here, instead of playing e5, white elects to play knight c3. So here, the only way for black to develop their light square bishop is to get rid of this e-pawn, which is covering this really nice outpost square for the bishop. So after d takes e4, we get knight takes e4, and the bishop comes to f5. So the theme, again, getting that light square bishop out and active. White plays knight g3 with a tempo on the bishop, and after bishop g6, h4, just going right after that light square bishop. That's okay though, black's going to create an escape square for the bishop by playing h6. And after knight f3, black can just continue with their development, knight d7, h5, again going after that bishop, bishop h7. It's okay, the bishop gets tucked away. And here's kind of the end of the opening stages. White has this nicely advanced h-pawn, which is a strength, but it's also a bit of a weakness. You know, white's going to have trouble castling kingside, but oftentimes what white will do here is play bishop d3. And it's prudent for black to exchange bishops, and here in this position, black has really solved the problem of the light square bishop, having exchanged it for the white light square bishop. Just to show you how a game would continue, I just pulled some computer moves for you. So how would development look in the Caro Kann? After a move like e6, we get bishop d2, bishop e7, white's knight's coming out, and black's knight's coming to very natural squares, and you could get some exchanges, but really this is what we're looking at in terms of development. A little bit of a cramped position for black, but a very, very solid pawn structure and great development with chances for the queen and the rook to get involved on the queen side. So that's how development would proceed in a typical Caro Kann. So the next one I want to show you is the Panov Botvanic attack. And so we'll get into our Caro Kann here. And this is the position we've come to a couple times, and here white plays e takes d5 to start off the Panov Botvanic attack. After c takes d5, we get c4. And this is a really great move for white. And the idea behind this is very logical when you understand that the Caro Kann is really all about the light squared bishop. By playing c4, what white does is they open up a diagonal for their queen to come to this b3 square, and from this b3 square, she can control this diagonal and put pressure on the b7 square. And the b7 square for black becomes immediately weak as soon as the light square bishop moves. So the Panov Botvanic attack is a great way, as white, to keep your opponent's light square bishop pinned down. How would this normally proceed for black? Black would play a move like knight f3, supporting the center, and white would respond with knight c3, just really piling up on the center here. And this is where black could make the mistake of playing something like bishop f5. The problem with this, like we mentioned before, is the queen coming to b3, and now you're just going to either lose a pawn, it's going to get very unpleasant for you. So you don't want to do that. You want to avoid this position as black. Do not play bishop f5. Instead, just continue with your development. Knight c6, knight f3, knight f3, and g6. And this almost turns into almost like a Catalan type variation. So after like something like c takes d5, knight takes d5, queen b3, e6, with the bishop coming to fianchetto and the king to castle kingside. So pretty straightforward. If you ever get played, if someone ever plays this against you and you're playing the Caro Kann, you really want to avoid the temptation to bring this bishop out, especially because the queen will just pop up to b3 and eat your lunch, and you don't want that to happen. All right, the final variation I'll show you is called the exchange variation, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Here, white chooses to exchange pawns, and we get bishop d3. And in the same way that the French exchange is notoriously a pretty boring line to play, the exchange variation of the Caro Kann is similarly very boring. And one of the reasons why is because development's kind of stunted for both sides after this position. In this position, you just want to develop normally. So moves like knight c6, white might try and defend their center with c3, knight f6, bishop f4, bishop g4, queen coming to b3, queen d7, all very normal developmental moves. We'll get things like e6 with dark square bishop coming to d6. And so the exchange variation is super straightforward. Just develop your pieces, and a lot of these games end in a draw because neither side is really able to establish much of an advantage in the opening.